Okay, so here I'm going to discuss a concept that I haven't really talked about much before, but it's kind of evident in what I talk about. Kind of the same topic comes up. So let's look at the way in which, first of all, society is not Machiavellian, which would basically mean like the end justifies the means, and it's kind of, there's like a goal that's being focused on. But instead of that, it's kind of halfway, it's partial, it's kind of covert. Because it's this sort of thing, it doesn't want to admit that that's the way it works, but that's the way it works. So on one hand, it values appearances, right? You have to care about what you dress and how you look and what you wear and stuff like that. You have to care about those things that don't have any impact, even at the expense of things that do have an impact. Right, as if to cover something up, so that shows you it's a non-value subversive state. You wouldn't need that if you were at peace or a full, potential and free and everything. So it shows you you're in a non-value subversive state that requires this sort of illusion that the mass always falls for in every era of human history of so it'll be framed as a negative, of a specific thing, like it's your fault for not keeping up appearances, you lack the ability, you lack the awareness, the emperor has no clothes fallacy. In a literal sense there too, because obviously based on what you're wearing and how you look and stuff, but it wouldn't be what is this new like they're advertising it like it's something. But the thing is that valuing appearances would come at the expense of reality, or is only necessary in a subversive reality. So you could argue a functional basis, but that's not actually what people do. And so it's kind of like, is it worth it to sacrifice? This is always the stimuli acme that I talk about. Is it worth it to sacrifice sleeping with random people or anybody around the world, that you want, in exchange for, hey, how's it going, Joe? Is it worth sacrificing sleeping with anybody or everybody that you want around the world in order to create like a good family system and it's easier for society to control and stuff like that? That's the actual reason why it happens, but that's not what people say or how they perceive it. They'll instead try to trick themselves and appeal to the ego, through, it's love, it's meant to be as a soulmate, even though in practice the process that created that is not. It wouldn't hold up to that absolute that's being posed, right? Because you have to pose a false absolute to specify something that would otherwise be universal or inherent, like it's just a process that exists, right? Period. So you could sleep with various people all around the world, like there's no inherent limit to it, right? So you would be free, and it just is a natural process. Not saying it's good, not saying it's bad, but in order to specify it and limit it to just one person is a lot of work, and you see the conflict with that, the conflict of contrivance, I call it. So people are constantly struggling with trying to maintain that false absolute to rationalize specifying something that is otherwise free or inherent in nature. And so that creates problems because people are not acknowledging the functional basis. We're saying, okay, I'm sacrificing everything and doing this to create a family system, right? Because it's good for the family system, or it's easier for society to organize and control. That's not what they're saying, right? They'll be fooled by the gratification of the ego, like it's love, it's soulmate, it's meant to be. And the flip side of that is, it's kind of like people aren't really aware of the nature of the process, or they don't want to be aware, right? They want to be kind of fooled and basically you want to be lied to, like, oh, you're the only one for me, and that kind of thing. You can see how the process originates, like, okay, just a random person walks up to you on the street, and that's how I met your mother, kind of a thing. Like, you can see in practice that it's not absolute, but then you're surprised if it doesn't work out, or all the conflicts, pitfalls of it, or even like, then somebody else comes along down the road and does the same thing, walks up to them and use a pickup line. Oh, that worked for you, but how could it possibly work for anybody else? Like, the nature of the process kind of explains itself that, right, it wouldn't surprise you that, they just had a better pickup line, they just had the better timing, than you did. And so it's the same process that was, again, it's arbitrary, it's subjective, it's not rooted in something absolute, right? So valuing appearances is a big question mark. So the other part of that is the fact that, and there's just like the inherent freedom argument with that too, is like, you could still choose to do the same thing, but you should at least be aware of the nature of the process. Part of the process shouldn't require you not to think about it, right? That's the difference. And censoring reality and stuff like that. The fuck is that? Okay. New Hampshire road work is even worse than New York road work, I guess. Jesus Christ. But the point is that, now let's look at the way it does apply to society is like, the end justifies the means basis of it's worth it to do the following things is apparently what society does or turns a blind eye to without really fully acknowledging. It's worth it to indoctrinate and brainwash children when they're young so that they behave like good, productive members of society. It's okay to distract people with entertainment, escapism, etc. if it means that, okay, it maintains this artifice of contrivance. It's okay to, people drink and smoke and distract themselves like that if it helps to maintain somehow the imbalance overcompensation dynamic of being in an artificial contrivance state. So the point is that you're doing these things that on their own you would question, right? Like, wait a second, if that happened in World War II Germany, right, indoctrinating youth the way we raise our children and stuff like that, again, it doesn't have to be political, it doesn't have to be a specific thing. I'm just saying, you're trying to indoctrinate people before they're old enough to think for themselves. Society will, but the end result is good, they'll say, or, it's for the right reasons, it's to make them a good person. But should you have to do it that way is the point, right? So you're saying the end justifies the means, but the process you would criticize, right? Okay, pretend I make a little minimalist commune somewhere, and I'm raising children and stuff like that. The first thing people say, it's a cult and you're brainwashing children. But society does that. Now, you could say it's for a good reason, but the term brainwash I would use to apply to, you're indoctrinating people heavily in a lot of ways. Parents do it, society does it, media does it, teachers do it, in ways that you're like using a reward punishment system, conditioning them, or all this kind of thing. When they're in their most vulnerable state, when you're limiting even that state, that they had more potential, but you don't let them exercise it, you are, heavily indoctrinating them at a stage in their life where they cannot think for themselves critically, right? They're not old enough, they're not able to do that. So that is exploitative. That is absolutely exploitative. Any other context that would be considered. But somehow society turns a blind eye and says, that's okay because of the end result, right? The end justifies the means. Other things, again, like drugs and alcohol and overcompensations like that, that we apparently need to maintain a society, of imbalance. And then what else? So it's not really criticizing that state, but it's saying that even the people who are part of that state evidently aren't at peace with it because then they need those things, right? So think about the minimalist example again. Somebody's living out in the woods and they're picking berries, or again, like tribes live a certain way, or Amish people or something. That doesn't require necessarily as much overcompensation as what we see. Whereas that's the whole irony of it, is like a self-created problem. Throughout human history, people tolerated all kind of situations, but they were often dealing with nature, whereas now it's dealing with man-made, human-made contrivances. So you could be more at peace. You're living in the woods, you're living a very meager, simple life, but you could be at peace with it, and it could be consistent. And you're just, what you're doing is directly tied to your survival, so you don't really need a lot of artifice and appearances and stuff. Versus, versus modern society, like you have to overextend here we go, Vermont again. I keep forgetting we have to cut through here. But yeah, so again, society is willing to turn a blind eye, and so a similar point on the stimuli acme is like, people want to be controlled by a process, or at least they effectively are, but it's like, conditionally controlled. Like, okay, if somebody walks up to you and just says, hey, you wanna have sex, you would probably say, okay, no, that's weird, that's creepy, right? But then you want somebody to effectively do the same thing, but just appeal to your ego and base instincts and other things, personality and stuff. So which one is really more honest? The one that overextends and pretends it's about something else, or the one that is direct about it, right? And then, okay, like you pretend you want those other things, but they're still based on the stimuli acme because you could do that with anybody then. Okay, it's about the social element and their personality. Okay, so then do the same thing with random people, regardless of their gender, regardless of their looks. Like, okay, just meet random friends like that. Do pickup lines to meet friends rather than that. Like, which I'm not saying that sort of thing can't happen, but it's just not the same. Like, so that's the concept of separation that I talk about. Like, you would separate the two, and that would make it more honest, instead of, oh, now it just becomes a matter of awareness. Like, are you aware or not? And it's like, the degree of artifice, what I call the contest of contrivance. Oh, it's artificial, but who can put up the artifice the best? Who can, have the best riz and the best pickup line and the best this and that? So it's still the same process. It's just, it's not as obvious, so that makes it okay. Right, so that's kind of the subversive manner of it. So you could be doing the same exact thing, but people will take issue, they kind of resign themselves to, okay, it's artificial, but it's the way you do it. Oh, you did it well enough, or you didn't do it well enough. Right, you didn't put enough effort, you didn't have enough money to appeal to them, like, so it's kind of like, oh, what's the difference between good riz and bad riz? Let's use modern lingo. Like, good riz is dishonest and artificial and appeals to their ego and other things just to achieve the same end, dependent over extent or pretense. And it, appeals to a lowest common denominator, and it, labors under the delusion of a false absolute to specify the stimulant acme. And it is, unaware of the nature of a larger process, even though it's self-evident in the conflict of contrivance. And it also allows you to, just use like some sort of preconceived lowest common denominator element. Right, whereas bad riz would be honest or direct or aware of the nature of the process, so you wouldn't try to pretend. So it's like you'd rather be deceived in some elaborate way, and you enjoy that. So it's like you accept that you're going to be controlled by the same process, but you don't want to be aware that you're controlled by it, but you want to be controlled by it nonetheless. So it's a matter of, can they control you well enough? Like the little song and dance, playing hard to get kind of thing that people do. That might seem to be a positive thing, but it actually shows you're not at peace with the process. You're not aware of the process. You can't face the process. So it's a false absolute that requires bypassing critical thinking in order to kind of train you like an animal and tame you by your own inherent hedonistic basis. So the other aspect is that, again, you need like some subversive element, like you resign yourself to it and you accept the fact of non-value. So now it becomes who can keep up the illusion the best, who can overcompensate the best. Versus if you're aware of the nature of the process, you would say, what's the point of that? Because you know it's artificial, so just because they're less aware, so you want to exploit them, basically. You want to exploit the fact that they're not as aware as you are, but then it'll be framed like that's somehow your outward position, not just a greater degree of awareness of the same process that's present, which again would have tremendous evidence to support it in the conflict of contrivance, in the divorce rates, and anything else. Like, I don't know. Never going to see enough of Vermont Army. We just always find an excuse to go back. So yeah, again, the way that certain things are bypassing, you care about the end result. Like, so it doesn't matter that this person would have again, all the criteria that you're going through. So that's why social contrivance is a pretense for dependent over extended pretense. Like, well, like that's kind of redundant, but like, it's about social this and that, but it depends on zero-sum means, dependent over extended, incentive that they have. So like, have social skills without the dependent over extended pretense, nobody cares. or don't have them, but with the dependent or rescinded pretense, right? And that'll somehow appeal. So it's like, right, so it's kind of an artificial thing. So let's look at that with relationships too. It's like, oh, what's the difference between good riz and bad riz? Again, it's like, oh, whether you find that person attractive, whether you're drunk, if that's necessary to make you sway your opinion, or whether they have money, right? Things like that. So it's basically disingenuous because you'll pretend like it's about other things. Oh, it's about personality, it's about this and that. But like pretend, okay, somebody you don't find attractive, somebody who doesn't have money, but now they have a good personality or something, that wouldn't be enough, or vice versa. Somebody who does have money, does have you find attractive, now they're kind of boring, but it doesn't matter. So again, there's that incentive behind it, right? That again, it's just about something else, but people again pose this like false absolute pretense to control something, or kind of defer to it, and then they want to exploit it halfway. Like, oh no, it's not about that, but it's really about that, but they don't want to be held accountable for it being about that. So I mean, I can say that with female privilege directly. It's like, okay, like women being known for their looks, let's say, and sometimes they'll play the victim, but it's like, you can present yourself how you want to be perceived. So like, okay, don't wear makeup and just wear very basic, boring clothes or whatever, and then people might not care about your looks as much. But no, you spend hours doing makeup, spending money, clothing, all these different things, and now you want to play dumb and like, oh, you'll play dumb if you don't want the attention, but you'll play into it if you do. So it's kind of like, there is a disingenuous element to that. Like, oh, how dare this person look at me? But yeah, you put so much effort into your appearance. Not saying that gives them the right to do it, but it's just like, it's really what you play into. And then, oh, but if you find somebody attractive or you want something, then, oh, now you'll play into that. So it's like this non-accountable thing, right? Like this false absolute default that I talk about with like, oh, you're just some old lady going to the grocery store and buying some things, and but why should you feel bad about it? Meanwhile, that grocery store and that company you're buying from is ravaging some third world country halfway around the world, is causing some children to starve to death, but you don't care about that part. That requires too much thought, out of sight, out of mind. So people aren't that stupid, but they are that selfish and incentivized. So that's what they're ruled by, bread and circuses type thing. And then the flip side with the stimuli is the same thing. Like, again, you want to appeal to it and benefit from it, but you don't want to be held accountable for it. So if you were to point that out, you'd be like, oh, that's against women. You're saying something against women. But, you can hide behind that, but in reality, that's what they're benefiting from. So it's like, right, or that's what they're playing into. So that's one of the things that subverts meritocracy, is like, on both sides. Right, that women get used to that privilege and that men reward that privilege. It just subverts pretend that didn't exist. Now there'd be tremendous accountability. Now, okay, you actually have to do something of significance or whatever. It's just a bad process that's not really based on anything. And when people glorify something like that, let's just be direct about it. It's like, it's the stuff of animals, right? Nature's way of inspiring reproduction is pleasure, but people value themselves so much in their ego that their own pleasure becomes like the end-all be-all. It's love is meant to be. That's what it's based around. Even if you pretend like, oh, it's not just sex, it's based around that, in the sense that, people can get attached to anyone or anything, but even that's a form of egotism, like your own experience and exposure. But like people dance around that in ways that they don't understand. Like, oh, we're gonna hold hands. Well, do you hold hands with your friends? Do you hold hands with, random people? It's like you're holding hands. Like, oh, we're not having sex. See, but it's still playing into the elements, right, that would make that attractive and beneficial. So it's like, really making out or kissing. So when people take that literally, like, oh, it's just about sex. It doesn't have to just be about sex, but you're kind of dancing around it constantly, like sexual related things, which applies to basically everything, right? How the person looks, everything they do could appeal to that. any other touch, even that seems innocent, like holding hands or whatever, right? It all has an element of it, and the human imagination is like that, where people obsess over something. So let's look at a certain fetish, like my top video on this channel, with like 11K views now, the foot fetish video, where I'm just kind of explaining it. It's like, why does that appeal to people? Like, oh, it's a form of submission, but it's not submission to the other person. It's submission to your inherent desires that are inhibited in society. And so you might think, well, why does that appeal where the other body parts don't, like the traditional, or in any special way? Because it's something that's like always being revealed to you that isn't always revealed to you, so it feels like a form of exposure and voyeurism. And it's also something like, just, again, lowest part of the body, so it's kind of has a submissive element built into it. And it's, not as hard to attain compared to, let's say, the other body parts that, whatever, that wouldn't be as easily revealed. So it's like a form of revealing something, but not quite in the same way. So it's like if somebody was asexual now, right, all those things wouldn't apply, but they're still used to control them, and you're still subject to them, like, lip service that people pay to, but they want to be controlled at half-mast, or there's like a deep selfishness to it, like where everything's projected on the base of self. Suppose you sacrifice that, they'll be like, oh, you lack the ability to do it, or the selfishness of others will come out and project onto you, versus having another standard altogether entirely, of like amalgam theory, for example. It's like an inability to achieve a false absolute, not that it's not absolute, kind of like emperor has no clothes fallacy, like it's supposedly an absolute thing, whether it be God or love or something else, but then, oh, if it doesn't work out, that's your fault, or oh, if you can't find it, that's your fault, like, right, so you can't hold it accountable. It's somehow just being assertive that it's absolute, but then it's your fault if you don't go along with it, if you don't see it. About 8 minutes left of this trip. It's not a very long drive, but I'm getting kind of sick of Vermont here. Yeah, just remember, social confinement's that necessary and valid is what I always said. And it's kind of like, just... That's, I always find that hysterical that that's my top video on this channel. It's like, post videos, they said it'll be, YouTube content creation is a meritocracy, they said, and then my most viewed videos is foot fetish explanation, like, this is what we get for, I could discuss anything else, existential philosophy or anything, but no, that's what people want to watch. So That's what I call like defined by myopic marginalization. Like, does that define me, that my most viewed video is that, or does it define the audience, right? It shows you that appeals to other people, not necessarily that's what I value myself or place any special emphasis on, right? I could have hundreds of videos about different topics, just a general thought experiment, right? You could do like 100 different things and they're all completely different, and one of them goes viral or whatever and the other 99 don't, then you'll be defined, oh, you're that guy who made that one video. But you made the other 99 too, and you might have put just as much effort and thought into them, but because the audience or the public or other people like that one, you'll be defined by that. So, oh, you're that guy who did that thing, right? So they're ignoring all the other things you did, so they're defining you basically by them, right? It's like you're being defined more by it says more about the observer than what is observed, right? That's often how it works. So you're defined by the audience and what they react to, not by what you actually choose to do or put out, because it gets certain things will get disproportionate value and credit. Right. So I might think that video is stupid, but oh, it's my most viewed video. So does it define me, the foot fetish thing or something like that? Like, what other fetishes could I explain? Like, oh, the getting whipped. Why do people like getting whipped? It's kind of a similar thing. It's like you're giving into one form of control versus another. That's really what it's about. So, for example, society takes control over a lot of things in your life, especially the stimuli acme. Like, sexual things are very heavily controlled, inhibited, indoctrinated, or whatever, right? So that's a form of freedom from it. You say, okay, now with this permission, with this one person, with this, certain circumstance, all of a sudden now I'm going to seek, like, it's weird. It's sort of like almost a masochistic, well, that is literally masochistic, but it's a sort of an appeal to how much you're controlled in society. You're so controlled normally from, any constantly repressing the sexual element that, right, what I always say, repression leads to obsession, right? One of my catchphrases is just, so because you're repressed so much from doing that, now it's like an outlet, so you want to give into it and you want to kind of release. You need a release. There's not enough just to simply engage in some sort of sexual behavior. Sometimes it's like you want like a release, so like take the control that you experience from society and contrivance that limits you, inhibits you, represses you, and now you give that person the power instead. So it's like, okay, you're still being controlled, but now at least you're being controlled by that person instead of society generally. Or now, you're being controlled by that, you're being controlled by somebody that you want, like you choose at least. Oh, either you're controlled by society or you're controlled by that person, but at least, you get to choose who you are controlled by, or you get to choose, you get to choose who you're controlled by, you get to choose like how kind of you're controlled in that way, so that makes it better. That's kind of what sums up relationships, right? Either way you're being controlled, but one scenario is you're just controlled anyway, just in society in general. The other one is, at least I get to choose, I want to be controlled by this person, and I want to be controlled in this way with this fetish, right, as an outlet for overcompensating for the regular inhibition you normally experience. And so, that's kind of the issue, is like you'll choose to be controlled by like who you choose to be controlled by, but you're still being controlled like how you specify the stimuli acme. So it's kind of like, right, it's kind of a sad commentary, because you're basically just conceding control in that and saying, okay, I don't value it, I'm like, you're just not free with that. So now I'm going to at least choose how I'm controlled, or the degree to which I'm controlled. Yeah, that is the one lesson I'll leave you with, is like the feeling that like everything is the same, right? Like everywhere you go, it's kind of the same thing, and it's like, right, everything looks the same, everything looks the same, you have the same franchises, stuff like that. And so, that's what it's like to live in a globalist society, or that shows you like who really rules you and who controls your life. Those things will be a constant no matter what, right? The middlemen rule any era, so it's like it doesn't matter what you do, you're always going to be paying your taxes, you're always going to be buying from the big corporations and stuff. So the fake humanism that's used to control you that way is kind of funny, like, oh, it's in the name of the collective and for other people that you sacrifice, but then you do so in service of big corporations that monopolize everything. So it's used as a tool, like, oh, just the large number of people and stuff like that.